March 7, 1945. The Rhine River, swollen and muddy from the spring thaw, churned below the skeletal iron span of the Ludendorff Bridge at Remagen, Germany. Dawn's grey light filtered through a veil of mist, carrying the acrid tang of cordite and diesel exhaust that hung heavy in the air like a shroud. You could hear it before you saw it, the low rumble of tank engines echoing off the riverbanks, a mechanical growl that set your teeth on edge. Sergeant Alex Harlan crouched behind a jagged pile of rubble on the eastern approach. His M1 Garand rifle gripped so tightly his knuckles ached. At 23, with a face scarred by shrapnel from the Hürtgen forest, he felt the weight of the world pressing down, heavier than the steel helmet shadowing his eyes. The bridge loomed ahead, a 1,000-foot monster of girders and trusses, its roadway scarred by bomb craters, but still intact. A miracle in this hellscape. Harlan's platoon, what was left of the 27th Armoured Infantry Battalion after weeks of slogging through the Siegfried Line, had been rushed here in battered half-tracks just hours ago. Orders had crackled over the radio from Colonel James Anderson, 9th Armoured Division. Hold that bridge at all costs. It's the gateway to the Ruhr. No retreat. Simple words for a suicide mission. Harlan spat into the dirt, tasting the bitterness of unwashed fear. His men, 18 souls, including privates like young Tommy Ruiz from Brooklyn, whose hands shook as he chambered a round, spread out in hasty foxholes along the embankment. "Keep your heads down, boys," Harlan whispered, his voice steady despite the knot in his gut. The mist swirled around their olive-drab uniforms, soaked from the night's drizzle, and the cold Rhine wind whipped at their collars. Somewhere across the water, in the haze-shrouded hills of the Westerwald, the Wehrmacht was regrouping. Intelligence whispers spoke of Panzer divisions. Ghost Division they called the 116th, funneling south to plug this breach in Hitler's west wall. The bridge was undefended when the 9th Armoured rolled up. The Krauts had rigged it with charges, but fled in panic as American shells screamed overhead. Now it was theirs to guard. Harlan glanced at the demo charges still dangling from the girders like forgotten Christmas ornaments, disabled, but a reminder of how close disaster had come. A flare popped in the distance, its magnesium hiss cutting the fog, and Harlan's heart slammed against his ribs. "Contact!" Ruiz yelped, ducking as the first burst of MG-42 fire stitched the ground 20 yards left. Bullets whined like angry hornets, ricocheting off the bridge's railings with metallic pings. Harlan shouldered his Garand, sighting through the iron sights at the shadowy shapes emerging from the tree line. German infantry, grey-green uniforms blending with the underbrush, probing forward with bayonets fixed. Behind them, the earth trembled, the unmistakable thunder of tracks on cobblestone. "Panzer!" someone shouted. Harlan's eyes locked on it. A Panther AUSF. Its long-barreled 75mm KWK-42 gun, swiveling like a predator's gaze, turret scarred by previous battles. The beast rolled into view at the head of a column, its Maybach engine snarling as it crushed a hedgerow under its 45-ton frame. Flanking it, 2 more shadows materialized. Mark the 4s, their short 75mm cannons belching smoke. This wasn't a skirmish. It was the tip of a counterattack, wolf-pack style, aimed straight at the bridge's throat. Harlan's mind raced. Orders were clear. Guard the bridge. Buy time for engineers to secure it and for the main force to cross. No reinforcements for hours. He keyed his walkie-talkie, the bakelite crackling. "This is Harlan, Red Sector. Enemy armor approaching. 3 tanks confirmed. Infantry support. Request artillery. Over." Static hissed back, lines jammed, or worse. He was on his own. "Ruiz, take the left flank. Jenkins, bazooka on the Panther. Make it count." Private Eddie Jenkins, a lanky kid from Alabama with freckles like rust spots, fumbled for the bazooka tube slung over his shoulder, its rocket warhead gleaming dully. The Panther fired first. The shell howled over the embankment, slamming into the bridge's support pylon with a deafening crack that shook the ground. Sparks flew, and a section of railing buckled, but the span held. Harlan fired from the hip, his Garand barking in semi-auto, dropping a German lieutenant who tumbled forward, clutching his chest. The air filled with the stench of cordite and hot brass. His men returned fire, rifles cracking, a bar chattering from a nearby crater. But the Krauts pressed on, using the fog for cover. Jenkins popped up, bracing the bazooka on his shoulder. "Got you, you son of a bitch," he muttered, squeezing the trigger. The rockets streaked out with a whoosh, trailing fire, and struck the Panther's glacis plate dead on. The explosion was cataclysmic, a bloom of orange flame and black smoke that engulfed the turret. The tank slewed to a halt, its crew bailing out in flames, but the Markafis surged forward, their machine guns hosing the embankment. Bullets tore through Ruiz's position. He screamed as one grazed his arm, blood blooming on his sleeve. Harlan rolled to a new cover. A overturned jeep that offered scant protection. He could smell the rubber burning from a nearby hit. The bridge vibrated under distant footfalls. More Germans crossing the river on foot, trying to flank. "Fall back to the toll booths," he bellowed, directing his men in a ragged withdrawal. The Panther's wreck burned fiercely, a pyre blocking the road. But the Mark IVs maneuvered around it, their tracks grinding over debris. One fired point blank, the shell vaporizing a foxhole and silencing two men forever. You feel the mud sucking at your boots as you scramble, Harlan's breath ragged in your ears, the river's roar mocking your desperation. He paused at the toll booth's shattered windows, slamming home a fresh clip. This was it, the line in the sand. If they lost the bridge now, the entire 9th Armored's advance into the industrial heartland crumbled. Harlan sighted on the lead Mark IV's commander, exposed in the cupola, and fired. The man jerked back, gone, but the tank kept coming, its cannon traversing toward the bridge's vital center. Artillery finally whispered in. American 105s from across the Rhine, shells arcing high before crashing down in the German rear. Earth erupted in geysers of dirt and shrapnel, scattering the infantry. One Mark IV took a direct hit, its turret shearing off like a tin can lid. The other hesitated, then reversed, trailing smoke from a lucky rifle grenade. Harlan's platoon held, battered but unbroken, the bridge still theirs. As the echo of explosions faded, he slumped against the booth, wiping sweat and grime from his face. The counterattack was blunted, for now, but he knew it was just the opening salvo. Dawn's light strengthened, revealing more movement in the hills. Guarding this bridge wasn't a duty, it was defiance, one bullet at a time. The sun climbed higher over the Rhine, burning off the mist like a reluctant witness to the unfolding carnage. March 7th, 1945, Remagen's eastern bank, where the Ludendorff Bridge clawed at the sky like a wounded beast. Sergeant Alex Harlan leaned against the splintered toll booth, his chest heaving, the acrid bite of gunpowder clinging to his tongue. The wrecked Panther smoldered 50 yards out, its black smoke curling upward in lazy spirals, a grim sentinel blocking the road. Bodies littered the approach, American and German alike, twisted in the mud, their uniforms stained with the Rhine's chocolate-brown silt. Private Tommy Ruiz clutched his bandaged arm, his face pale as chalk under the helmet, while Eddie Jenkins reloaded the bazooka with trembling hands, the rocket's metallic tang mixing with the river's fishy reek. Harlan's radio crackled to life, Colonel Anderson's voice cutting through the static like a knife. "Harlan, report." "Bridge status?" The sergeant's jaw tightened. He could picture the colonel in his command tent miles back, maps spread under a flickering lantern, oblivious to the hell on the ground. "Holding, sir. Took out one Panther and a Mark IV. Infantry scattered, but they're regrouping. Needs support. Tanks. Anything." A pause, then the reply. "Engineers are en route to fortify. First Army's crossing at noon. Hold the line, Sergeant." "That's an order." And the line went dead, leaving only the distant rumble of artillery and the lap of waves against the pilings. You sense it before you hear it, the ground vibrating like a tuning fork struck deep in the earth. Harlan's eyes snapped to the tree line, where the Westerwald's pines swayed under a fresh gust. There, emerging from the haze like demons from the fog, came the full weight of the counterattack. Not 3 tanks, but a dozen. The 116th Panzer Division's spearhead, their Ghost Division moniker earned in the dust of France, now haunting the Rhine. Leading the charge was a Königssteiger, a 68-ton behemoth with its 80-mm gun protruding like a cannon from hell, its overlapping road wheels churning the cobblestones to gravel. Flanking it, Panzer Fies and Stuggy 3 assault guns, their hulls camouflaged in 3-tone patterns of green and brown, engines roaring with the fury of cornered wolves. "Jesus Christ," Jenkins whispered, dropping to a knee behind a sandbag barricade hastily piled from bridge debris. The toll booth shuddered as the first shells whistled in, 75mm rounds from a trailing Stu-G exploding against the embankment in fountains of earth and steel. Harlan dove, shards of concrete peppering his back like hail, the blast wave flattening his ears. "Positions! Bazookas forward! Aim for the tracks!" His voice was a bark, raw from shouting over the din. The platoon scrambled. Ruiz firing his M1 from a prone position, bullets pinging harmlessly off the Königssteiger's sloped armor. Corporal Lena Vasquez, a tough-as-nails sharpshooter from Chicago, picking off German spotters with her scoped Springfield. Their screams lost in the melee. The Germans came on relentlessly, infantry and Feldgrau swarming behind the armor, MP-40s chattering in disciplined bursts. One squad reached the bridge's edge, lobbing stick grenades that clattered across the roadway like deadly dice. Harlan rolled left, snatching up a fallen Thompson submachine gun, its drum magazine heavy in his grip. He hosed the closest cluster, the 45 caliber rounds stitching through wool and flesh, dropping 3 before they could prime their charges. But the tanks pressed the advantage. The Königssteiger's main gun boomed, the shell vaporizing a half-track on the western side, flames leaping 30 feet high, the screams of the crew inside twisting your gut. Harlan keyed the radio again, desperation edging his words. "Red sector to command, multiple heavies inbound. Königssteiger confirmed, closing on the span. We're getting chewed up." Static, then a faint acknowledgement. P-47s scrambled, 10 minutes out. Air support incoming. "Oh, damn it!" 10 minutes was an eternity here. He waved Jenkins forward. "That big bastard hit the side where the armor thins." Jenkins nodded, sweat carving tracks through the grime on his face, and shouldered the bazooka. The Königssteiger lumbered closer, its turret traversing slowly. The commander barking orders from the open hatch, binoculars glinting in the sunlight. The rocket launched with a thunderclap, streaking across the open ground, trailing sparks. It slammed into the Königssteiger's flank, just below the turret ring, a perfect shot. The explosion ripped through the engine compartment, flames belching from vents as the 700-horsepower Maybach seized in an inferno. The beast ground to a halt, belching black smoke, its crew scrambling out only to be cut down by Vasquez's rifle, precise cracks echoing like judgment. Cheers rippled through the platoon. Short-lived as a Panzer IV retaliated, its cannon shattering the toll booth's roof in a storm of debris. Harlan felt a sting across his cheek. Blood, warm and metallic, but pressed on, directing fire. The air thickened with the stench of burning oil and ruptured hydraulics. German engineers, undeterred, dashed forward under smoke cover, uncoiling demolition wire toward the bridge's underbelly. Private Ruiz spotted them first, his wounded arm forgotten as he lobbed a grenade. It detonated mid-air, shrapnel scything the group, but not before one reached a pylon, slapping on a satchel charge. "Demo team on the bridge!" Harlan yelled, sprinting across the exposed roadway, boots pounding scarred concrete. Bullets whipped past, one tugging at his sleeve like an insistent hand. He tackled the saboteur, the 2 men grappling in a frenzy of fists and curses, German gutturals against Harlan's raw English snarls. The charge's timer ticked audibly, a heartbeat in the chaos. Harlan drove his helmet's edge into the man's temple, stunning him, then ripped the wires free, crushing the detonator under his heel. Back on the embankment, the fight intensified. A Stuggy Thur pushed through the wreck of its comrade, its low-slung hull shrugging off small arms fire, 75mm gun-barking shells that cratered the approach. Vasquez chambered another round, her breath steady, and fired into the driver's viewport. A lucky hit that sent the vehicle veering into the river, plunging with a massive splash that sprayed muddy water across the span. But losses mounted. Jenkins took a round to the leg, crumpling with a howl. Two more privates went down to machine gun fire, their bodies jerking like puppets. Then the sky answered. The P-47 Thunderbolts screamed in low 850 caliber machine guns per plane, stitching the German column with lead. Bombs tumbled free, walking their destruction along the road, Panzer IVs erupting in fireballs, infantry vaporized in the blasts. The Königssteiger's hulk absorbed a direct hit, its ammunition cooking off in a chain of secondary explosions that lit the hillside like a bonfire. The counterattack shattered, survivors fleeing into the woods, leaving twisted metal and the moans of the dying. Harlan collapsed against a girder, the bridge trembling under the weight of what it had endured. His hands shook as he lit a cigarette, the match flaring briefly in the midday glare. The Rhine flowed on, indifferent, carrying debris downstream. Ruiz limped over, clapping his shoulder. "We did it, Sarge! Held the bastards!" Harlan nodded, but his eyes scanned the horizon. The 116th wasn't done. Reports crackled over the radio of more panzers massing north. Guarding this bridge meant staring down the abyss, one desperate stand at a time. The engineers' jeeps rumbled up from the west, but noon was still hours away, and the war whispered of greater trials ahead. The engineers' jeeps skidded to a halt on the western approach, their tires kicking up gravel that pattered against the bridge's underbelly like scattered hail. March 7th, 1945, mid-morning now, and the sun hung high over Remagen, casting harsh shadows across the scarred roadway. Sergeant Alex Harlan straightened from his lean against the girder, the cigarette dangling from his lips, sending a thin trail of smoke upward, mingling with the oily haze from the smouldering wrecks. His cheek stung where the shrapnel had kissed it, a thin line of blood crusting over, but he ignored it, eyes fixed on the newcomers. Lieutenant Mark Riley, a wiry engineer from the 117th Battalion with grease-blackened hands and a toolkit slung over his shoulder, hopped out first, barking orders to his crew of a dozen men in khaki fatigues, their faces smudged with the grime of hurried travel. "Harlan? Christ, you look like hell," Riley said, clapping the sergeant on the arm as he surveyed the carnage, the twisted hulk of the Königssteiger blocking the eastern lane, its 88-nm barrel pointed skyward like an accusatory finger, and the river churning with debris from the sunken stooge. The air reeked of scorched rubber and cordite, undercut by the Rhine's perpetual damp earthiness. Harlan grunted, flicking the butt into the mud. "Feel like it too. Bridge held, but barely." "Those demo charges the Krauts left still live?" Riley nodded grimly, signaling his men to fan out. "We'll sweep 'em. Got Bailey sections and steel mats to reinforce the spans, and anti-tank obstacles, hedgehogs, mines if we can lay 'em quick. But we need time, Sarge." "You boys buying it?" Harlan's platoon gathered around, a ragged cluster of survivors. Tommy Ruiz nursing his bandaged arm with a field dressing stained crimson, Eddie Jenkins propped against a sandbag with his leg splinted using a rifle stock, and Corporal Lena Vasquez methodically cleaning her Springfield, her dark eyes scanning the horizon. Only 12 left now, their M1s and Thompsons clutched like talismans, faces etched with exhaustion under sweat-streaked helmets. "Time's the enemy," Harlan replied, his voice gravelly from the smoke. "Radio says the 116th's pulling back to lick wounds, but scouts spotted more armor north. Jagged Panthers maybe, or worse. First Army's crossing starts at noon. We fortify, then hold till the floodgates open." You feel the urgency in the air, thick as the mist that had burned away, replaced by the metallic clang of tools as Riley's team swarmed the bridge. Hammers drove spikes into the girders, securing anti-personnel mines along the railings, their pressure fuses glinting dully. Men hauled steel beams across the roadway, sweat pouring down their brows, while others unspooled barbed wire in hasty entanglements on the approaches. Harlan directed his men to assist, Ruiz and Jenkins hauling ammo crates from a supply truck that had miraculously threaded the lines, boxes of 30-06 rounds, grenades, and fresh bazooka rockets that clinked like promises of vengeance. Vasquez took point on the eastern overlook, her scope sweeping the tree line where the Westerwald's pines whispered secrets in the breeze. By 11 a.m., the bridge transformed. Bailey pontoons braced the weakened pylons, their riveted panels groaning under test weights, and concrete Jersey barriers lined the toll booths, now fortified machine gun nests with 50 cal Brownings mounted on tripods. Harlan paced the span, boots echoing on the patched asphalt, the Rhine below roiling with the current's relentless push. He could taste the salt of his own sweat, feel the vibration of distant thunder, artillery duels far off, or perhaps the approach of doom. Private Ruiz sidled up, his Brooklyn accent cutting the tension. "Sarge, you think the brass knows what they're asking? One bridge, a handful of us against a division." Harlan clapped his good shoulder. "They know, but we don't quit. Eat something, chocolate bars in the crates. It'll be a long afternoon." The respite shattered at 11:30. A low drone filled the sky, not American P-47s this time, but the sinister whine of FW-190 fighters streaking low from the east, their radial engines bellowing as they strafed the western bank. Tracers arced like fiery hornets, chewing up an engineer crew laying mines. Screams pierced the air as a man lost his leg to a cannon round, blood spraying across the barriers. Harlan dove behind a Jersey wall yelling, "Take cover! AA fire if you've got it!" But they had none, only rifles spitting futile defiance. The fighters peeled off after 2 passes, leaving 2 engineers dead and the bridge pocked with new craters. But the real threat followed on the ground. From the northern hills, the earth trembled anew, a deeper rumble than before. Harlan crawled to the overlook, binoculars pressed to his eyes, heart pounding like a war drum. There they were, the 116th Reserves, a mechanized fist unclenching. 8 Jagdpanthers led the van, sleek tank destroyers with their fixed 88mm PK-43 guns, hulls low and lethal, camouflaged in splinter patterns that blended with the underbrush. Behind them, Panzer IVs and half-tracks disgorged fresh infantry, SS troops by their black collars, moving with parade ground precision. Mortar rounds began falling, 80mm shells whistling in to bracket the bridge, exploding in geysers of mud and shrapnel that peppered the spans like buckshot. "They're coming full force!" Vasquez shouted, her Springfield cracking as she dropped a spotter on a ridge. Harlan grabbed the radio, the bakelite warm in his grip. "Red sector to command. Jagged Panthers inbound. 8 confirmed. Infantry heavy. Airstrike needed now." Static crackled, then Colonel Anderson's voice strained. "Engineers report fortifying complete. Crossing commences. Infantry platoons moving up. Hold 5 more minutes, Harlan. Thunderbolts rerouted." 5 minutes. Harlan barked orders, positioning Jenkins with the bazooka at a choke point, Ruiz manning a 30 cal on the booth. The engineers, undaunted, kept working, welding plates over craters even as bullets whined overhead. The Jagd Panthers opened fire at 500 yards, their 88s booming like thunderclaps. The first shell struck the eastern embankment, obliterating a wire entanglement and sending Riley flying backward, his arm mangled, cursing in pain. Harlan returned fire with his Garand, rounds sparking off the lead destroyer's mantlet, useless against 80mm of sloped steel. The Germans advanced methodically, half-tracks, 20mm flak guns, hosing the defenders, tracers glowing orange in the daylight. One Jagdpanther veered right, its gun traversing toward the bridge's heart. Jenkins fired the bazooka, the rocket slamming home on the side sponson. Flames erupted, the vehicle slewing into a ditch, but the others pressed on, shells cratering the roadway, shaking the Bailey sections. You taste the fear, metallic and sharp, as Harlan sprints across the span to aid Riley, dragging him to cover while mortars rain down. A near miss buckles a girder, the bridge groaning like a living thing in agony. Vasquez picks off a half-track driver, the vehicle careening into a barrier with a crunch of metal, but SS troops swarm forward, grenades arcing toward the nests. Ruiz's 30 cal jams, a round cooking off in the chamber. He clubs a German with the barrel, buying seconds. Losses mount. Another engineer down, Jenkins screaming as shrapnel peppers his side, but the line holds barely, the Rhine's roar a constant underscore to the bedlam. Then, the American crossing began. From the west, the first Shermans splashed into the shallows, their 70 B5mm guns swiveling eastward, treads churning the mud. Infantry waded behind, M1s raised, the 9th Armored's tide turning. But the Jag Panthers targeted them, shells splashing deadly fountains in the river. Harlan stood, exposed on the span, directing fire. "Pour it on 'em! For the bridge!" His voice carried over the din, rallying the battered souls. A Sherman crested the bank, its coaxial 30 cal chattering, knocking out a trailing Panzer IV. The counterattack faltered as more allies poured across, but the Jag Panthers dug in, their guns thundering defiance. Harlan wiped blood from his eyes, his own or a comrade's, and sighted on an SS officer directing the assault. The Garand bucked, the man crumpling. Noon struck, the sun directly overhead, illuminating the chaos in stark relief. The bridge was the anvil, the Panzers the hammer, but Harlan's stand had bought the crossing, defiance forged in fire, with the war's full fury still uncoiling. Noon's glare beat down on the Ludendorff bridge like a searchlight interrogating the wounded span, turning the Rhine's muddy waters into a shimmering ribbon of chaos below. March 7th, 1945, Remagen's eastern bank, where the air hummed with the staccato fury of machine guns and the guttural roars of diesel engines clashing like titans. Sergeant Alex Harlan crouched behind a Jersey barrier pocked with bullet scars, his M1 Garand's barrel hot against his palm, the stock slick with sweat and Rhine silt. Blood trickled from the gash on his cheek, mixing with the grime to form a gritty paste that itched under his collar. Around him, the bridge thrummed with activity. Engineers welding frantic patches on the girders, sparks flying like fireflies in the daylight, while his platoon poured fire into the advancing Germans. The first Sherman tanks had crested the western bank, their olive-drab hulls dripping river water, treads grinding over the Bailey sections with a metallic groan that vibrated through the roadway. Lieutenant Riley, his mangled arm bound in a hasty tourniquet, directed traffic from a makeshift command post in the toll booth ruins, his voice hoarse over the din. "Keep 'em rolling, third tank, ease left, mind the crater." The lead Sherman, a battle-scarred M4A3 named Bessie by her crew, pivoted its 75mm gun eastward, the turret's whine cutting through the bedlam as it targeted a jagged panther hunkered on the embankment. The shell lanced out with a sharp crack, slamming into the destroyer's mantlet and sending a plume of smoke skyward. But the German beast fired back, its 88mm round shrieking past to explode against a pillion, buckling steel with a tortured screech. Harlan's eyes burned from the cordite haze, the stench of exploded propellant and overheating engines filling his nostrils like a toxic fog. You feel the deck shudder under your boots as another wave of infantry splashes across the shallows. GIs from the 2nd Armored, their pack harnesses heavy with bandoliers, wading knee-deep in the churning current, rifles raised high. Bullets from the SS troops whipped the water into froth, men toppling with cries that drowned in the river's roar. Private Tommy Ruiz, his bandaged arm slung across his chest, manned the 30 caliber machine gun on the booth's rooftop nest, its belt-fed rounds chattering in long bursts that stitched the tree line. "Eat lead, you bastards!" he yelled, the recoil jarring his frame, brass casings ejecting in a hot cascade that pinged off the barriers. The Jag Panthers pressed their assault, 5 remaining now, their low profiles making them ghosts in the underbrush. One slunk forward along the northern flank, its fixed gun traversing with mechanical precision toward the crossing Shermans. Harlan spotted it first, the sun glinting off its interleaved wheels as it crushed a fallen log underfoot. "Vasquez, take the driver!" he barked, gesturing to Corporal Lena Vasquez, who lay prone on the bridge's central span, her Springfield's bipod dug into a sandbag. She exhaled slowly, the crosshairs settling on the viewport's narrow slit, and squeezed. The .30-06 round punched through with a sharp report, the jagged Panther veering wildly before slamming into a hedgerow, its engine coughing black smoke. But the others retaliated, a salvo of 88mm shells arcing in, one striking a Sherman broadside. The tank erupted in a fireball, flames licking the air 30 feet high. The crew's screams cut short as secondary explosions ripped through the ammo racks. Harlan sprinted to the eastern edge, dodging a mortar round that cratered the roadway behind him, shrapnel whistling like vengeful spirits. He grabbed a discarded bazooka from Jenkins, who lay pale-faced nearby, his leg wound seeping through the splint. "Hang in there, kid. Medics incoming," Harlan muttered, shouldering the tube. The lead Jagd Panther loomed at 200 yards, its gun blooming orange as it fired again, the shell vaporizing an engineer team welding a beam, their tools scattering like broken toys. Harlan braced against a girder, the Rhine's wind tugging at his coat, and launched the rocket. It streaked true, impacting the destroyer's rear deck where the armor thinned. The explosion was visceral. A chain reaction that blew the tracks apart, the vehicle slewing sideways in a spray of dirt and fire, blocking the path for its sisters. From the west, more Shermans rolled onto the bridge, their 50 cals hammering the Germans, coaxials spitting lead that forced the SS infantry to ground. Colonel James Anderson's voice crackled over the radio in Harlan's pocket, urgent and clipped. "Harlan, this is command. 9th Armoured's main body crossing. Hold the east for 10 more minutes. Artillery's walking fire onto their positions." Harlan keyed back, ducking as an MP-40 burst chipped concrete nearby. "Copy, sir. We're bleeding, but the bridge is ours. Tell the tankers to hit 'em hard." He could hear the distant thunder of 150mm howitzers now, shells whistling overhead to crash in the Westerwald hills, erupting in geysers that swallowed half-tracks whole. The Germans adapted, their half-tracks disgorging more troops who dashed forward in bounds, using the wrecks for cover. An SS sergeant, his black collar stark against the Feldgrau, led a squad toward the bridge's underbelly, satchel charges in hand, aiming to blow the supports from below. Vasquez spotted them, her rifle barking twice. 2 down, but the leader pressed on, crawling through barbed wire that tore at his uniform. Harlan vaulted the railing, dropping to the catwalk 10 feet below the roadway, the river's spray misting his face like cold sweat. He fired from the hip, the Garand's bolt cycling smoothly, dropping a grenadier mid-stride. The SS man turned, pistol raised, but Harlan closed the gap, tackling him into the girders. Fists flew in the confined space, the German's knife glancing off Harlan's helmet with a clang, drawing a shallow cut across his forearm. Harlan headbutted him, stars exploding in his vision, then drove his bayonet home, the blade grating on bone. The body slumped, the charges tumbling into the Rhine with a splash. Back on the span, Ruiz's gun fell silent, jammed again or out of ammo. He switched to his M1, firing deliberate shots as SS men reached the toll booths, grenades sailing over the barriers. One detonated near Jenkins, peppering him with fragments. He groaned, clutching his side. Harlan climbed back up, hauling Ruiz behind cover as bullets ricocheted off the steel trusses, sparks dancing like fireflies. "Push 'em back!" he roared, grabbing a Thompson from a fallen engineer, its drum magazine thumping against his thigh. He hosed the closest cluster, the 45 rounds thudding into flesh, bodies jerking and falling into the mud. The Shermans formed a firing line now, their hulls crowding the bridge, guns belching fire that outranged the Jagdpanthers. One tank destroyer took a direct hit to the turret, its 80mm cooking off in a spectacular blast that lit the afternoon sky, shrapnel raining down like iron confetti. The remaining Germans wavered, their advance crumbling under the combined weight of American armor and artillery. Mortars still fell sporadically, one shell glancing the roadway and wounding Vasquez in the shoulder. She bit back a curse, tying it off with a strip from her shirt. But the tide had turned. Infantry from the crossing fanned out eastward, linking with Harlan's platoon. Fresh M1s adding to the chorus of defiance. Harlan slumped against a pylon, the Thompson dangling from its sling, his chest heaving as the last Jagdpanther reversed into the tree line, trailing flames. The Rhine carried away the echoes of battle, debris bobbing in its current, wreckage, weapons, the remnants of lives spent. Riley limped over, his face ashen but grinning through the pain. "You crazy son of a bitch! We did it, bridge secure." Harlan nodded, lighting another cigarette with shaking hands, the match's flare illuminating the exhaustion in his eyes. Ruiz and Vasquez gathered the wounded, medics splashing across now with morphine syrets and stretchers. But scouts reported over the radio, the 116th regrouping further north, V2 sites in the Ruhr vulnerable if the advance held. The stand wasn't over. It was evolving, the bridge no longer a lone sentinel, but the spearhead of invasion. Harlan exhaled smoke, tasting victory's bitter edge, knowing the panzers would return with the dying light. The afternoon sun slanted westward over the Rhine, painting the Ludendorff bridge in bloody hues as shadows stretched long across the scarred roadway. March 7th, 1945, late afternoon in Remagen, and the air hung thick with the metallic tang of spent casings and the oily reek of diesel from idling Shermans. Sergeant Alex Harlan wiped the grime from his eyes with the back of his hand, the cut on his forearm throbbing under its hasty bandage, blood seeping through like an accusation. He stood amid the controlled chaos on the central span, the bridge's girders creaking under the weight of crossing vehicles, more M4 Shermans rumbling eastward, their treads clanging rhythmically, followed by jeeps hauling towed 57mm anti-tank guns that bounced over the patched craters. Lieutenant Mark Riley leaned against a Jersey barrier, his tourniqueted arm slung across his chest, face pale but set in grim determination. "Medics got Jenkins stable, lost a lot of blood, but he'll pull through," he reported, nodding toward the western bank where stretchers bobbed in the shallows, corpsmen splashing through the current with morphine kits and plasma bags. Corporal Lena Vasquez sat nearby, her shoulder wound packed with sulfur powder, methodically reloading her Springfield with clips that clicked into place like puzzle pieces. Private Tommy Ruiz handed out K-rations from a crate, his bandaged arms stiff but functional, the Brooklyn edge in his voice cutting the fatigue. "Chow down, folks. Can't fight on empty guts." Harlan nodded, tearing into a chocolate bar that melted sticky on his tongue, the sweetness a stark contrast to the bitterness coating his mouth from hours of cordite and fear. You feel the vibration through the deck plates as another platoon of GIs double times across, their boots pounding in unison, bayonets fixed on M1s slung low. The 9th Armoured's engineers had woven a web of steel and wire around the approaches, Czech hedgehogs clustered like iron porcupines, telemines buried in hasty grids, their anti-tank fuses peering up like hidden eyes. But the radio's chatter painted a darkening picture. Colonel Anderson's updates spoke of the 116th Panzer Division consolidating north of Bonn, their Ghost Division rallying with fresh fuel from hidden depots, V2 launchers in the Ruhr scrambling under Allied threat. The respite ended with a distant rumble, deeper than thunder, rolling from the northern hills like the growl of an awakening beast. Harlan snatched his binoculars from his web belt, the leather strap worn smooth from use, and scanned the horizon. There, beyond the smouldering wrecks of Jagdpanthers, the tree line parted to reveal the counterattack's final gambit, a reinforced Kampfgruppe spearheaded by 5 Tiger I tanks, their 88mm KWK-36 guns elevated like executioner's blades, hulls scarred from Ardennes snow but still lethal at 50 tons apiece. Flanking them, CDKFZ 251 half-tracks belched black exhaust, disgorging Panzer Grenadiers in reversible winter camo, their STG-44 assault rifles glinting as they fanned out. Behind, the earth churned under the tracks of 2 elephants, heavy tank destroyers with case-mated 88mm guns, their massive forms moving with ponderous menace. Contact north, tanks inbound, heavies confirmed. Harlan bellowed into the radio, the bakelight crackling as he relayed positions. Anderson's reply was immediate, laced with urgency. Harlan, First Army's committed. You're the hinge. Hold or the Ruhr slips away. P-47s on station, 5 minutes. Artillery priority fire. Harlan pocketed the set, grabbing his Garand from where it leaned against a girder, the wooden stock warm from the sun. Vasquez, Ruiz, high ground on the booths. Anti-tank teams forward. Shermans, form a wedge. His voice carried the weight of command, raw and unyielding, as the platoon snapped to action. Vasquez climbed to the rooftop nest, her scope sweeping the advance. Ruiz hauled a 50 cal belt to the nest, the links clinking like chains. The Tigers opened fire at 800 yards, their 88s booming in sequence, shells howling through the air to bracket the bridge. The first struck a Sherman on the eastern flank, the tank's side erupting in a jet of flame and shrapnel that showered the span, igniting a fuel drum with a whoosh that singed Harlan's sleeve. He dove behind a hedgehog, the blast wave flattening his ears, debris rattling off the steel like hail. You taste the acrid bite of phosphorus as the half-tracks advance, their 20mm flak cannons traversing skyward in anticipation of air support. But the Panzer grenadiers swarm forward on foot, using the rolling terrain for cover, potato masher grenades clutched in gloved hands. Sherman crews responded with a roar, their 75mm guns elevating in unison, the turrets' gyros whining as loaders slammed high-explosive rounds home. The lead Sherman, Bessie, fired first, the shell glancing off a Tiger's turret ring with a spark that lit the underbrush, but the follow-up from a second tank penetrated the track, halting the behemoth in a skid of mud and sparks. Harlan directed a bazooka team, 2 fresh engineers with rocket tubes shouldered, toward a flanking elephant. Tracks first! Cripple it! The rocket streaked out, slamming into the overlapping wheels, with a crack that echoed over the Rhine, the destroyer slewing sideways as its Maybach engine screamed in protest, flames licking the sponson. The Panzer Grenadiers reached the wire at 200 yards, cutting paths with wire snippers that flashed in the sunlight, their STG-44s barking in controlled bursts that pinned the defenders. Bullets whined off the girders, one ricocheting to clip Ruiz's helmet, denting the steel liner and drawing a curse from his lips. Vasquez's Springfield spoke from the nest, each shot a precise thunderclap, dropping a grenadier mid-stride, their bodies tumbling into the entanglements like discarded rags. But the Tigers pressed, one maneuvering around its crippled brother to bring its gun to bear on the bridge's pylon, the shell exploding against the Bailey section with a deafening crunch that sent ripples through the structure, the Rhine below foaming white from the vibration. Harlan sprinted to the anti-tank gun just emplaced, a 57mm M1 with its long barrel pointed north. The crew, 3 GIs in sweat-soaked fatigues, frantically cranking the elevation wheel. "Load AP! Fire on my mark!" He sighted down the tube, the Tiger filling the aperture, its commander exposed in the cupola with a pair of Zeiss binoculars. The gun bucked, the armor-piercing round lancing out with a whip crack, punching through the front glacis and igniting the ammo stowage. The Tiger brewed up spectacularly, flames belching from every hatch, the crew bailing into the open, only to be cut down by Sherman coaxials, 30 cals chattering like angry bees. Overhead, the P-47s arrived with a scream, their Pratt & Whitney radials thundering as they dove, 850 cals per plane, unleashing a storm of lead that shredded a half-track's canvas top. The vehicle exploding in a fireball that blocked the road. Bombs tumbled in strings, walking their fury along the German column, one elephant absorbing a 500-pound hit that flipped it onto its side, tracks spinning futilely in the air. The remaining Tigers reversed under the onslaught, their engines bellowing retreat, but not before a parting shot cratered the roadway near Riley, burying him under rubble. Harlan dug him out, the lieutenant coughing dust, ribs cracked but alive. "Bastards! Almost had us." The counterattack splintered, survivors melting into the Westerwald's folds, leaving a trail of burning hulks and the moans of wounded echoing across the fields. Harlan's platoon slumped in exhaustion, the bridge holding firm as the last Sherman crossed, linking the east bank to the Allied advance. Vasquez slid down from the nest, her face streaked with powder burns, clapping Harlan's shoulder. "We stopped 'em, Sarge. The Ruhr's open." He nodded, scanning the northern horizon where smoke rose like funeral pyres, the radio buzzing with confirmations. The 116th shattered, their Panzer thrust blunted. But as dusk crept in, painting the Rhine purple, Harlan knew the war's shadow lingered, the bridge guarded, the counterattack broken, yet the night's whispers promised no mercy. Dusk settled over the Rhine like a heavy cloak, the sun's last crimson rays bleeding into the western sky and casting elongated shadows from the Ludendorff Bridge's girders onto the muddy eastern bank. March 7th, 1945, Remagen, Germany, and the air cooled rapidly, carrying the chill bite of the Westerwald winds laced with the lingering stench of charred metal and unburied dead. Sergeant Alex Harlan sat on a crate of spent 30 cal belts near the toll booth ruins, his M1 Garand across his knees, the wooden stock scarred from the day's frenzy. The cut on his cheek had crusted over, pulling tight with every grimace, while his forearm bandage itched under the drying blood. Around him, the bridge pulsed with newfound life. Shermans idling in a defensive arc, their exhaust pipes puffing lazy clouds, and engineers patching the final craters with asphalt mix that steamed faintly in the fading light. Lieutenant Mark Riley hobbled over, supported by a crutch improvised from a rifle barrel, his face gaunt under the stubble, but eyes alight with weary triumph. "Scouts confirm it, Harlan. The 116th's pulling back to the Sieg River line. Your stand bought us the Ruhr. Factories are falling like dominoes already." Harlan grunted, rubbing his jaw, where a bruise bloomed purple from the SS grapple. He could still feel the ghost of the knife's edge, the metallic tang of fear in his throat. Private Tommy Ruiz sprawled nearby, unwrapping a fresh K-ration can of Spam with his good hand, the tinny scrape echoing softly. "Hell yeah, Sarge. We turned that wolf pack into scrap. Pass the crackers." Corporal Lena Vasquez leaned against a hedgehog barrier, her shoulder sling fashioned from a torn engineer jacket, cleaning her Springfield's bolt with a rag that smelled of gun oil and river damp. Only 10 of the original platoon remained combat effective now. The others medevaced west in bouncing ambulances, their moans fading into the river's murmur. You sense the shift in the rhythm, the frantic staccato of battle giving way to the low hum of consolidation. GIs from the 2nd Armored Division fanning out to secure the perimeter, their flashlights bobbing like fireflies as they strung more wire and emplaced 81mm mortars facing north. Harlan stood, joints protesting with a dull ache, and paced the span's edge, the Rhine's current swirling black below, carrying fragments of the day's wreckage. A shattered helmet, a twisted MP-40 barrel glinting in the twilight. Colonel James Anderson's jeep crunched to a halt on the western approach, its tires grinding over Jersey barriers, the colonel's silhouette sharp against the headlights. Tall, ramrod straight in his field jacket, a map case tucked under his arm. "Harlan!" Anderson called, striding forward with purpose, his boots clicking on the patched concrete. The colonel's voice cut through the evening hush, steady but edged with respect. "First Army HQ's buzzing. You didn't just guard a bridge, you stopped a goddamn Panzer counterattack cold. That Königsteiger kill, the Jagdpanthers, Brass is calling it the hinge of the offensive." Harlan saluted crisply, though fatigue tugged at his shoulders like lead weights. "Just following orders, sir. Platoon's what held it." Anderson's gaze swept the survivors, Ruiz offering a half salute with his spoon, Vasquez nodding silently, and he clapped Harlan's arm. "Modest to a fault. Eisenhower's sending a wire. Distinguished Service Cross for you, silver stars for the rest, but more than medals. The Ruhr's ours because of this scrap heap. V2's silenced, factories in Allied hands by week's end." The colonel spread his map on the hood of the jeep, the paper crinkling under his finger, as he traced the advance lines, snaking eastward like veins of victory. "Ninth Armored pushes at dawn. Your boys spearhead the flank. Rest tonight. Hot chow incoming." As Anderson departed, his jeep's engine fading into the night, Harlan felt a hollow bloom in his chest, not elation, but the quiet weight of survival. He lit a cigarette, the match's sulphur flare illuminating Ruiz's grin. "Cross, huh? I'll frame it over the mantle." Vasquez snorted, chambering a round into her rifle with a satisfying click. "Save the shine for after the war. Scouts say stragglers in the woods. Could be snipers." Night deepened, stars pricking the velvet sky above the Westerwald. The bridge, now a beacon strung with blackout lamps that cast pools of yellow on the roadway. Sentries paced the catwalks, their M1 carbines slung low, while medics tended the wounded in a tent pitched under the eastern overhang, the scent of iodine and coffee wafting over. Harlan took the midnight watch, perched on a girder overlook, the cold steel biting through his fatigues. The Rhine whispered below, indifferent to the empires it had swallowed, its surface a mirror for the moon's pale glow. Distant flares popped in the north, illuminating phantom shapes, perhaps the 116th's remnants, or just shadows, but no thunder rolled this time. His mind replayed the day in flashes, the Panther's flame-wreathed wreck, Jenkins' bazooka whoosh, the SS man's dying gurgle under the bridge. You hear the soft pad of boots as Vasquez joins him, her breath visible in the chill. "Can't sleep?" she asked, settling beside with her rifle across her lap. Harlan exhaled smoke, watching it dissipate into the dark. "Too many ghosts. Thought we'd lose it all when the tigers hit." She nodded, eyes on the tree line. "We didn't. You didn't. That's what counts." Ruiz called up from below, voice muffled by a mouthful of rations. "Sarge, you philosophical types gonna share the view or what?" Laughter rippled faintly, a rare sound cutting the tension, binding the platoon like mortar in the line. By dawn, on March 8th, the bridge stood unbowed, its spans humming under the first wave of the advance. Shermans leading columns of half-tracks laden with infantry, artillery pieces towed in rumbling trains. Harlan's platoon mounted up in a commandeered M3, the half-track's engine coughing to life, its 50 cal manned by a fresh gunner. As they rolled east into the Ruhr's industrial haze, factories belching smoke in surrender, Harlan gripped the rail, the wind whipping his scarf. The counterattack was history, shattered on the Rhine's anvil, but the war ground on. Berlin a distant thunder, victory a promise forged in the mud of Remagen. He'd guarded a bridge, stopped a Panzer tide, and in doing so, cracked the Reich's spine. One man's orders, a world's turning point.